The kitchen door of the Vale estate clicked shut in Micah Rivera's face, soft as a fork set down after dinner, and for 1 second he stood there under the copper awning with freezing rain running from his hair into his collar. One hand clamped around the envelope Celeste Vale had pressed into his palm and the other spread over the small, impossible curve beneath his coat. The servant's entrance smelled like wet stone, rosemary, and the rich meat roasting somewhere inside for people who would never eat beside him. "Read it somewhere private," Celeste had said, not raising her voice, not needing to. Her pearls sat high against her throat, and her gloved fingers had not quite touched his skin. "Adrian has made his decision. I am being kinder than the council would be." Now the envelope bent under Micah's thumb. His nails were bitten down, blue at the edges from the cold. He tore it open with his teeth because his hands would not work right, and the paper inside was thick, cream-colored, stamped with the Vale crest in silver. Adrian's name waited at the bottom. Adrian Vale, the alpha who had kissed flour off Micah's cheek behind the south pantry, who had whispered, "After the winter vote, I bond you in front of all of them," like the world was something he could simply order to move aside. The letter said, "I regret the mistake between us." It said, "Our association would damage my PAC responsibilities." It said, "You will accept the enclosed settlement and make no claim." Under it was a cashier's check for $50,000. Micah Rivera typed so neatly it looked like a label on a coffin. His breath came out broken and white. "No," he said to nobody, and then louder, toward the closed door. "No, he wouldn't write this." The door opened only 3 inches. Celeste's pale eye appeared in the gap. "Do not embarrass yourself, Micah." Inside, laughter rose from the main hall, bright and warm, followed by the tuning of a quartet. Celeste glanced down at his hand on his stomach, and something hard passed across her mouth. Some boys confuse attention with a promise. Adrian is upstairs with the Harrow family. Their daughter understands duty. Micah backed off the step and looked up through the sheet of rain. On the second floor, framed by gold curtains and chandelier light, Adrian stood in a black tuxedo beside a tall woman in emerald satin, while an older alpha clasped his shoulder for the room to admire. Adrian's jaw was tight. He turned once toward the window, like he had felt the thin, unfinished pull between them tug across the dark, and Micah nearly lifted his hand. 2 floors above, Adrian's phone sat locked in his father's desk, and a Vale driver had already reported that the Rivera boy had taken money and left before dinner. Micah knew none of that. He only saw Adrian not coming. Celeste stepped onto the wet threshold with a black umbrella she did not offer him. "There is a Greyhound leaving Portland before dawn. My car will take you as far as the station. If you care for whatever you are carrying, you will not force Adrian to watch you be removed." The words struck lower than the rain. Micah folded the letter once, twice, and shoved it with the check into his coat pocket. He wanted to throw it at her shoes. He wanted to run upstairs with muddy soles and make Adrian look him in the face. Instead, a cramp of fear tightened beneath his palm, small and secret and alive, and he swallowed until the taste of metal left his tongue. "Tell him," Micah said, each word scraping out. "Tell him I waited." Celeste's smile did not reach the porch light. "He will not ask." The black town car idled at the service drive, exhaust ghosting over the gravel. Micah climbed in with 1 suitcase and no gloves, and as the estate shrank behind the rain-blurred glass, the front doors finally flew open and Adrian came running down the steps, shouting a name the storm swallowed before it reached the road. Micah pressed his palm to the rear window until the cold glass burned. But the town car turned through the iron gates before Adrian's shape became anything more than black cloth and movement under the porch lights. "Please," Micah whispered, not to the driver, not to Celeste, maybe not even to Adrian anymore, and the baby inside him gave one faint flutter like a fish under ice. The driver kept both hands at 10 and 2. He had a gray buzz cut, a wedding ring, and the blank face of a man paid not to hear things. At the Portland station, he set Micah's suitcase beside a puddle and said, "Tickets at will call," then drove off before Micah could ask who bought it. The bus smelled like damp wool, diesel, and vending machine coffee. Micah sat in the back with the envelope under his shirt, because his coat pocket had a hole, and every mile north felt like a door locking behind him. In Seattle, he threw up behind a restroom stall and almost tore the check in half, but a sharp cramp folded him over the sink. He stared at his own face in the scratched mirror, pale, rain-chapped, 21 years old, and said, "Okay, little one. We don't need him." But he did not cash the check. Not in Seattle. Not when he crossed into Oregon. Not when the first clinic bill came with a red stamp and then, strangely, a second notice arrived showing paid in full by private assistants. He called the billing desk from a payphone outside a grocery store, rain tapping the plastic hood over his head. "Who paid this?" he asked. The woman on the line chewed gum close to the receiver. "Doesn't say, honey. Some kind of Omega emergency fund." "From what family?" "No family listed." The line clicked dead, and Micah stood there with quarters sweating in his palm, wondering why kindness could feel like another trap. 7 winters later, the bakery windows in Astoria fogged before sunrise, and Micah wrote Rivera's bread and sweet on brown paper bags with a marker that squeaked when the tip got dry. The shop was narrow enough that 2 people had to turn sideways near the espresso machine, with black and white tile, 3 chipped cafe tables, and a bell above the door that stuck whenever the ocean air swelled the frame. Jonah did his homework at the flour-dusted prep table, one knee bouncing, pencil gripped too tight in his left hand. At 7, he had Micah's mouth, Adrian's stubborn chin, and eyes the color of storm clouds over steel. People noticed. They always noticed. A fisherman once stopped mid-order, stared down at Jonah, and muttered, "Vale Gray," before Micah dropped a tray so hard every croissant slid sideways. Since then, Jonah wore a mariner's cap low over his face when the shop was crowded. "Dad," Jonah said that morning, tapping his math worksheet, "if 12 muffins cost $18, why don't we charge more? Mrs. Kim says you underprice." "Mrs. Kim should mind her own register," Micah said, sliding a warm cinnamon roll onto a saucer. Jonah sniffed, pleased despite himself, and the overhead lights flickered once, twice. The old golden retriever tied outside the door stopped wagging and lay flat on the wet sidewalk. Micah's hand froze on the icing spoon. "Breathe through your nose, Joe." "I am." "Slow." Jonah's small shoulders rose, fell. The lights steadied. From the apartment above the shop, under Micah's bed, a locked metal box held the letter with Adrian's perfect-looking signature, the uncashed $50,000 check, and Jonah's hospital bracelet, where the nurse had left the father line blank after Micah stared too long and said, "No one." The bell over the door jammed, then gave a weak clack as Mrs. Kim pushed in from the rain, shaking her umbrella. "Micah," she said, voice lowered, eyes fixed on the little TV above the coffee grinder. "You better look." On the screen, Adrian Vale stood at an airport podium, older, sharper, a dark coat buttoned to his throat, while the caption read, "Vale Heir returns TO stabilize Western Pac Council." Jonah looked up before Micah could reach the remote, and every light in the bakery went out. "Everybody stay where you are," Micah said into the dark, though his own voice came out thin. The espresso machine hissed once and died. Rain ticked against the front windows. Jonah sat frozen at the prep table, his pencil snapped clean in 2, silver-gray eyes still reflecting the dead TV screen like it was lit from inside him. Mrs. Kim clicked on her phone flashlight. "Transformer?" she asked, But she was looking at Jonah, not the ceiling. Micah wiped his hands on his apron, crossed the narrow shop, and crouched until he blocked the screen with his shoulder.
Yo.
Look at me. Jonah's nostrils flared. That man, he whispered. Why did he feel loud? The question landed in Micah's chest and stayed there. Outside, the golden retriever whined with its belly pressed to the sidewalk. Micah reached for Jonah's wrist, feeling the too-fast thump beneath warm skin. Storm pressure messes with old wiring. That's all. Jonah did not blink. You lie different when you're scared. Mrs. Kim sucked in a breath through her teeth, soft but sharp. Micah stood too fast, clipping his hip on the table. Homework in the apartment. Now. Dad. Now, Jonah. The alpha edge in the boy's sense sparked, bright and green like crushed pine needles, and every glass cake dome on the counter gave a tiny chime. Then Jonah shoved his worksheet into his backpack and ran upstairs, sneakers pounding each wooden step. Micah waited until the apartment door shut before he pulled the TV plug from the wall with wet fingers. Mrs. Kim lowered her flashlight. That was him, wasn't it? Micah busied himself with the register, though it had no power and no reason to be opened. Shops closed till the lights come back. Micah, please. The word scraped out before he could soften it. Mrs. Kim's face changed, the way it did when a customer counted quarters for day-old bread. She folded her umbrella under her arm. Normal don't protect a kid from blood, sweetheart. After she left, Micah flipped the sign to closed and locked the door, then climbed to the apartment where Jonah had buried himself under a quilt on the couch with his cap pulled low. Micah wanted to call the school and cancel tomorrow's courthouse field trip. He wanted to pull the blinds, pack the metal box, and drive until the ocean was behind them. Instead, he warmed milk on the gas stove because running once had already cost him 7 years of answers, and Jonah watched every move he made now. You're still going tomorrow, Micah said, setting the mug down. Mrs. Alvarez needs chaperone forms signed, and you worked hard on that civics project. Jonah peeked from under the brim. Courthouse has police, and metal detectors and boring murals. Will that man be there? Micah's hand tightened around the mug. No, 300 miles away, Adrian Vale stood in his mother's Portland dining room beneath a portrait of his grandfather, peeling off black leather gloves while rain dragged silver lines down the windows. Celeste poured tea as if the airport cameras, the stroke rumors, and the council panic were nothing more than a late lunch. You look tired, she said. Diplomacy ages men who think feeling is policy. Adrian did not sit. The skin under his shirt collar burned in a crescent, exactly where an incomplete bond mark had ached every October for 7 years. Where is Micah Rivera? The teapot paused. Only half a second. Still that name. Celeste set the pot down. He took the settlement, Adrian. He signed away any claim before you left for Geneva. Some Omegas prefer freedom over duty. Show me. The file is sealed. Unseal it. Her smile thinned. Your father is barely speaking. The council is splitting. And you come home chasing a boy who cashed a check and vanished? Adrian stepped closer, and the chandelier crystals trembled faintly overhead. I wrote him every week for a year. Celeste's fingers closed around her napkin ring. Grief makes people remember generosity where there was humiliation. At the edge of the room, her assistant's tablet buzzed. Celeste glanced down, and the color drained from her mouth before she covered it with tea. The alert line read, Astoria Courthouse School Visit. Minor sent reaction risk flagged. Possible veil marker. Celeste read the alert twice before turning the tablet face down. But Adrian had already seen enough of the blue glow reflected in the silver tea tray. What risk flag? He asked. A scheduling nuisance, she said. and her voice had gone smooth in the way polished marble was smooth. Astoria wants extra security for your outreach hearing. Adrian's bond mark burned hard enough that his fingers brushed his collar before he could stop them. I didn't agree to Astoria. Celeste lifted her cup. You will. Small towns enjoy feeling consulted. The next morning, Astoria's courthouse smelled like floor wax, wet wool coats, and old paper. Jonah stood between two classmates under a mural of salmon and loggers, his mariner's cap pulled low, while Mrs. Alvarez explained how a judge's bench worked. Micah had signed the permission slip with his jaw clenched so tight his molars ached. Then packed Jonah a lunch with the crusts cut off, because that was what he could control. At 10:17, 3 Veil security alphas crossed the lobby in black coats, rain shining on their shoulders. They were not looking for anyone. They did not even slow down. But Jonah's head snapped up. His backpack slid off one shoulder. Jonah, Mrs. Alvarez said. The lobby lights flickered, and every police dog near the metal detectors went quiet at once. Jonah pressed both hands over his nose like the air had teeth. Dad, he choked, though Micah was 6 blocks away pulling sourdough from the oven. Then his knees buckled on the marble. By the time Micah reached the clinic, his apron was still dusted with flour and one shoe was untied. Jonah lay on a narrow bed beneath a paper blanket, furious tears tracking into his hair. I didn't do it, he whispered before Micah could speak. Micah bent over him, palms on both sides of his face. Hey, look at me. You didn't do anything wrong. The doctor, a tired beta woman with a stethoscope full of tape at the tubing, closed the curtain and lowered her voice. His system is reacting like an alpha onset, but too early and too strong. There's a restricted stabilizer, but it has to be matched through verified paternal bloodline. Micah's throat closed. No, Mr. Rivera. There isn't a father on file. That's not what I asked. The doctor's eyes softened, which somehow made it worse. If there's a powerful family involved, hiding may hurt him now. Jonah stared at the ceiling tiles. One had a brown leak stain shaped like a crooked star. Am I sick because of him? Micah took his hand, feeling how small it still was despite the sharp green bite of his scent. You are not sick because of anybody. Your body is asking questions we haven't answered yet. Then answer them, Jonah said, and his voice cracked on the last word. Micah signed the discharge form against medical advice with his left hand shaking so hard the pen stuttered. At the desk, the printer spat out a copy with Jonah Rivera. Father line blank, possible inherited alpha marker flagged in red before the nurse snatched it away and muttered, I'll seal this. But across town, in a borrowed council office above a bank, Celeste's assistant watched the same alert appear on a private screen. He swallowed, dialed Portland and said, Ma'am, the child survived the reaction. Celeste was silent for one breath. Then she said, Good. Now find out who else saw his eyes. By noon, the rain had turned sideways, slapping the bakery windows hard enough to rattle the painted sign. And Micah kept Jonah upstairs on the couch with a quilt, a bottle of electrolyte drink, and strict orders not to come down. Jonah lasted 22 minutes. Micah heard the slow creak of the apartment stairs while he was wiping the front counter with vinegar water, and he looked up to see his son in socks, cap low, carrying an empty tray like proving usefulness could erase the morning. Back upstairs, Micah said. Jonah's mouth tightened. I can stack napkins. You can heal. I'm not glass. The bell over the door fought the damp frame, stuck, then snapped loose with a sharp clack. Cold air rolled in first. Then Adrian Vale stepped inside wearing a dark wool coat speckled with rain. His hair wind-tossed, 2 council aides visible through the fogged glass behind him. The bakery went quiet in pieces. Mrs. Kim's spoon stopped against her teacup, The espresso wand sputtered unattended, and Jonah's tray tipped from his hands. It hit the tile with a flat metal crash that made everyone flinch except Adrian. He stood still, one hand on the door, eyes locked on the boy. Jonah stared back, lips parted, and the air between them changed. Micah felt it before he understood it. The sharp green flare of Jonah's frightened alpha sent reaching for something older, deeper, answered by Adrian's cedar and storm sent rolling through the room like thunder held under skin. The overhead lights flickered once. Outside, a terrier tied to the parking meter tucked its tail and sat. Adrian breathed in, and the color left his face. "Micah," he said, not loud, not polished for cameras, just ruined around the edges. Micah moved so fast his hips struck the counter. He put himself between Adrian and Jonah, palms flat behind him like he could hold his whole past back with two shaking hands. "You don't get to say that in front of my child." Mrs. Kim stood slowly, chair legs scraping. "Everybody," she said to the room, in the voice she used when gulls got trapped in her shop awning. "Coffee's on me next door." No one argued. Cups were abandoned. The aides outside leaned closer to the window, but Adrian lifted two fingers without looking, and they backed away. Jonah's small fingers twisted into the back of Micah's apron. "Dad," he whispered. "Why does he smell like when the lights went out?" Micah swallowed hard. "Go upstairs." No, the word came out with an alpha burr too old for 7 years old, and Adrian's jaw flexed as if it struck him physically. "How old is he?" Adrian asked. Micah laughed once, dry and ugly. "Don't." "Micah, how old?" "Old enough to know when somebody didn't stay." Adrian took one step, then stopped when Micah's shoulders rose. His gaze dropped to the flower on Jonah's knees, the too big mariner's cap, the silver-gray eyes peering around Micah's side. "I was told you left before dinner," Adrian said. "I ran after the car." Micah's pulse beat in his ears. Rain tapped the awning above the front window, quick as fingernails. "Convenient. I wrote to you. Don't you dare." "Every week," Adrian said, voice roughening. "For a year. Geneva, Prague, Berlin. Wherever they sent me, I wrote." Micah could feel the locked metal box upstairs under his bed as if it had weight in his hands. Cream paper, silver crest, a check with his name typed too neatly. "You expect me to believe that?" "No," Adrian said, and the answer was so quiet it stole the heat from Micah's anger for half a second. "I expect you to hate me until I prove it." Jonah tugged once on Micah's apron. "Dad, what's Geneva?" Before Micah could answer, Adrian's eyes shifted to the wall behind the counter, where Jonah's crayon drawing of a silver-eyed wolf stood pinned beside the menu. Under it, in crooked block letters, was Jonah R. Adrian stared at the drawing, then back at Micah, and something in him seemed to break. Clean through. "Did my mother give you something with my name on it?" he asked. Micah's hand went cold around the edge of the counter. Upstairs, hidden under his bed, the old envelope waited like it had been breathing for 7 years. Micah did not move until Jonah's fingers slipped tighter into his apron, warm and sticky with icing from the tray he had dropped. "Upstairs," Micah said, but this time his voice had no command left in it. Jonah looked from him to Adrian, stubborn chin lifted, then back toward the stairs one slow step at a time. "Don't let him be mean," he said. Adrian's throat worked. "I won't." Jonah narrowed those silver-gray eyes. "I wasn't talking to you." He disappeared up the stairs, and the apartment door clicked shut above them. Micah went up after him, not trusting Adrian out of sight but not trusting the box alone either, and came back with the old envelope held between two fingers like something pulled from a drain. He passed Adrian without a word and shoved through the rear door into the alley, where rain ticked off the metal awning and garbage bins shone black under the gray sky. Adrian followed, closing the door behind them. For a second, neither of them spoke. The bakery vent breathed out cinnamon and yeast into the cold. Micah slapped the envelope against Adrian's chest. "Here. Read what duty sounded like." Adrian took it carefully, too carefully, and unfolded the cream paper. His eyes moved once down the page. Then again slower. The rain struck the awning in tight little beats. "This isn't mine," he said. Micah's laugh came out sharp enough to hurt. "Your name's at the bottom. The signature is." Adrian held the page under the weak alley light, thumb near the silver crest. "This is how I signed council practice forms when I was 20. My father made me fill old resolutions for training. Look at the A too wide. I never signed personal letters like this. Not to you." "Convenient," Micah whispered, but his fingers had started shaking. Adrian reached into his coat and pulled out his phone. "Gwen, I need you in the Astoria office now. Pull sealed filings under Rivera. Micah. 7 years back. Anything attached to Vail domestic jurisdiction. And courier my Geneva archive." A woman's voice snapped through the speaker, brisk and irritated. "Hello to you too, Gwen." Something in his tone changed her breathing. 10 minutes, she said, and hung up. Micah pressed his back to the wet brick wall. "You wrote letters?" Adrian nodded once. "Every Thursday. I sent them through the estate pouch because council mail was monitored overseas. I never got one. I know that now." He looked down at the check still tucked in the envelope, its edges clean, untouched by any bank stamp. "You never cashed it." "I wanted to," Micah said, eyes fixed on a bottle cap floating near the drain. "There were nights Jonah needed formula and I counted quarters on the kitchen floor. But I kept thinking if I used it, then the letter became true." Adrian folded as if the words had hit his ribs. His phone buzzed before he could answer. He put it on speaker. Gwen's voice came through over clicking keys. Adrian listened carefully. "There is a sealed Omega separation agreement filed the week after the winter vote. It states Micah Rivera accepted settlement, waived PAC protection, waived future claims for himself, and any issue conceived prior to dissolution." Micah's head lifted. "Any what?" Gwen continued, colder now. "It's notarized by Harold Baines." Adrian stared at the rain running off the awning. "Baines died before I left for Geneva. 2 months before the signature date," Gwen said. "And there's more. Someone amended a clinic assistance trust to reroute notices away from you. Payments still went out under the emergency Omega fund you created, but every confirmation was redirected to Celeste Vail's office." Micah's mouth parted, but no sound came. "Paid in full. Private assistance. The pay phone in the rain." Adrian's hand curled around the letter until the paper creased. "Send everything to my secure line." "Already did. Adrian. There's a fresh access attempt on the boys' clinic file from a council. Terminal." The alley seemed to shrink around them. From inside the bakery came the muffled creak of the apartment stairs, and Jonah's small voice called, "Dad!" Adrian looked toward the door at the exact moment his phone buzzed again, this time with a council seal glowing on the screen. Adrian answered before the second buzz finished. "Vali." The voice on the other end was male, official, and too loud in the narrow alley. "Emergency notice of custody oversight has been filed with the Western PAC Council regarding minor child Jonah Rivera, presumed alpha heir of the Vail line. Pending review, unauthorized removal from Clatsop County may be treated as flight." Micah pushed off the brick wall. "What?" Adrian's eyes went flat, dangerous. "Who filed it?" But Micah already knew, because the bakery door opened behind them and Jonah stood there in his socks, face pale under the brim of his cap. "Dad." The council clerk kept reading, words clicking like teeth. Petitioner Celeste Vale alleges concealment of bloodline, medical neglect, and improper suppression of alpha onset markers by an unbonded Omega guardian. Micah snatched the phone from Adrian's hand. He is 7 years old. A pause. Papers shifted. Mr. Rivera, formal service will be made. The line went dead. For 3 seconds, only the rain spoke. Then Adrian said, Micah, listen to me. Do not run. Micah laughed without air in it. That's rich. If you run, she gets exactly what she needs. And if I stay? Jonah's sense spiked behind them, sharp enough that the alley light popped and went dark. Adrian took one careful step toward the boy, hands open. Jonah. Micah caught his wrist. Don't. The morning rush came anyway, because Bread did not care if a life was splitting apart. By 7 the next day, the bakery windows were fogged white. The floor smelled like wet shoes and cinnamon sugar, and Micah moved behind the counter with a smile pinned so tight his cheeks ached. Adrian's aides had stationed themselves across the street, pretending not to watch from under black umbrellas. Mrs. Kim stood near the espresso machine, arms folded, daring anyone to stare too long at Jonah, who was stacking paper bags at the prep table with flour dust on his knees. The bell jammed, rattled, then burst open. A woman in a navy raincoat stepped in with 2 uniformed pack marshals behind her. The line went silent. Even the milk steamer seemed to fade. Micah Rivera? She asked, though her eyes had already found him. No, Mrs. Kim said immediately. He's busy. The woman did not look at her. You are hereby served notice of emergency custody oversight, temporary medical decision review, and inquiry into Omega fitness under Western Pack statute. Not here, Micah said. His hand closed around the edge of the pastry case, leaving crescent marks in the fogged glass. The marshal held out a thick packet banded with red tape. Service is valid upon delivery. The words unfit Omega cut through the shop, followed by bloodline property, restricted heir, neglect through concealment. A customer near the door muttered, Jesus! Jonah's paper bags slid from his arms and scattered across the tile. He backed away from the table, eyes wide, breathing through his mouth like the air had turned bitter. Dad! Micah shoved around the counter, but Jonah bolted through the swinging prep door. A flour bin tipped with a soft white thump. Micah found him in the pantry between stacked sugar sacks and a bucket of rolling pins, curled small with flour smeared over his jeans and both hands pressed to his chest. Am I something bad? Jonah whispered. Micah dropped to his knees so hard pain shot up his legs. No. No. Baby, never. Are the Vallas going to take me away? Micah pulled him in, feeling that too fast heartbeat against his apron. And over Jonah's shoulder he saw Adrian through the back window, trapped on the sidewalk by a marshal reading from another red-banded order. No unsupervised contact pending review. Adrian looked up, rain running down his face, and mouthed one word. Wait. But that night, with Jonah finally asleep in his clothes and the bakery dark below them, Micah opened the locked metal box under his bed, put the letter, the check, and the birth bracelet into his suitcase, and reached for the bus schedule folded in the kitchen drawer just as the stairwell below gave one slow, careful creak. The stairwell below gave one slow, careful creak, and Micah froze with the bus schedule in his hand until Mrs. Kim's whisper floated up through the dark. Don't throw bread at me, sweetheart. I brought a lawyer. Gwen came in behind her with rain on her glasses, a laptop bag banging her hip, and an expression sharp enough to cut tape. Pack that suitcase if you want, she said, looking at the open metal box. But if you leave tonight, Celeste writes the ending. If you stay, I put her signature in front of every alpha who ever bowed to it. Dawn found Micah in the back seat of Adrian's black SUV, Jonah pressed against his side in yesterday's hoodie, The old envelope in Micah's lap, the $50,000 check still clean as bone. Adrian rode up front because the order said no unsupervised contact. But every red light his eyes found them in the mirror. Many years later, Micah did not stand at a kitchen door. He walked through the front entrance of the Vale Council Hall with rainwater squeaking under his shoes, Jonah's small hand locked in his left and Adrian's shadow steady at his right. The room smelled of cedar polish, wool coats, and old money. Tiered benches rose on both sides. Alphas who had once looked through Micah now leaned forward to see the boy with veil gray eyes. Celeste sat at the petitioner's table in a cream suit, pearls bright at her throat. Her mouth calm until Jonah lifted his chin and the lights above the dais flickered once. "This could have been private," she said, barely moving her lips. Adrian stepped to the center before the council chair could finish calling the matter. "No. That is how you got away with it." Gwen's files hit the table one after another, each thud echoing against the carved walls. The rejection letter, sealed in plastic. Adrian's childhood council practice sheets, the same too wide circled in black ink. A stack of Geneva letters, returned to no one, because they had never been mailed past the estate office. Harold Baines's death certificate, dated 2 months before Celeste's notarized separation agreement. The altered clinic trust logs showing Adrian's emergency Omega fund had paid Micah's bills, while every notice went to Celeste's assistant. Then Gwen clicked a recorder, and Nolan's shaking voice filled the chamber. "Mrs. Vale told me to flag the child's file and redirect all bloodline alerts before Counselor Adrian could see them." Celeste's chair scraped. "An assistant under pressure will say anything." "Then deny this," Adrian said. He held up Micah's hospital copy, the one with Jonah Rivera and the blank father line, beside the sealed agreement that claimed Micah had waived rights for any issue conceived, before anyone outside Celeste's office could have known. The chamber went so quiet Micah heard Jonah swallow. Adrian turned away from the council then, away from Celeste, and lowered himself to one knee on the polished floor in front of Jonah. Not a ruler, not an heir, just a man with reins still dark on his collar. "Jonah," he said, voice rough, "I should have found you sooner. I didn't. If you don't want my name today, I'll wait. If you never want it, I'll still protect you. But may I be known as your father?" Jonah's fingers dug into Micah's palm. "Do I have to call you Dad?" Adrian blinked hard. "No. Can I think about it?" "For as long as you need." Jonah nodded once, serious and pale. Then, "Okay, for the record." A sound moved through the benches, breath and shock and something like shame. Adrian stood beside Micah, not touching him until Micah, after 7 stolen years, let their sleeves brush. Celeste's face had gone white under the pearls. Adrian faced the council, his scent filling the hall like storm over cedar. 7 years were stolen from us. She does not get 1 more minute. The council chair lifted the gavel, but before it fell, Celeste rose with one last folder in her hand and said, "If you want the record complete, Adrian, ask your father why he signed the first order." Adrian did not turn around fast. He looked at the folder in Celeste's hand, then passed her to the side door where 2 marshals rolled in his father's chair. The old alpha wrapped in a gray blanket, one side of his mouth slack from the stroke, his right hand trembling on the armrest. The room shifted, uneasy. Celeste's fingers tightened on the folder. "Don't," she said, and for the first time that day the polish cracked. Adrian's father lifted 2 fingers. Gwen crossed to him with a recorder and held it close. His words came thick, dragged over stone. "I signed medical protection for the Omega, not separation." Celeste closed her eyes. The old man breathed through his nose, angry at the work of speaking. "She brought pages after. Said the boy had left. Said Adrian would ruin the council chasing him. He looked at Micah then, and shame bent his face lower than the stroke had. I did not ask enough. Micah felt Jonah's hand sweating inside his own. He wanted the apology to fix something. It did not, but it put one more brick back where Celeste had kicked the wall down. Gwen opened the folder Celeste had raised and slid the top sheet under the document camera. Initials. Same ink. Different paper grain. A first order for emergency Omega clinic care, altered into a cage. Counselors, Gwen said, voice clean as a blade. There is your complete record. The gavel came down so hard the water glasses jumped. Celeste was stripped before lunch. No counsel seat, no bloodline authority, no contact with Jonah, no access to trust accounts while sanctions were reviewed. When marshals took her pearls and badge for inventory, the little silver clasp made a dry click in the tray. She did not look at Micah. She looked at Adrian like property had learned to walk away. Adrian only put his body between her and Jonah until the doors closed. After that, life did not heal in one sweep. Jonah's stabilizer came in a refrigerated blue case with Veil Line Verified stamped on the label, and he hated the first dose because it tasted like pennies. Adrian came to the bakery every morning anyway. He fixed the shelf that sagged near the espresso machine. He burned pancakes so badly the smoke alarm screamed and Jonah laughed into his sleeve. On bad nights, when Jonah woke with the lights flickering and dogs barking down the block, Adrian sat on the apartment stairs in his coat until Micah opened the door and said, "You can come in, but don't make it a thing." Adrian never made it a thing. He learned Jonah liked cinnamon cereal, hated peas, and needed every promise written on the calendar where he could see it. In March, Micah drove to the bank with the old $50,000 check, the teller holding it up like a relic under fluorescent lights. "You sure?" she asked. Micah signed the back. "Every dollar to the Omega Shelter Fund. Put it under Jonah Rivera's name." By spring, the backyard behind the bakery smelled of wet grass, coffee grounds, and sugar from the cake Mrs. Kim had bullied into existence. String lights sagged between fence posts under Oregon rain clouds. Jonah stood in a navy jacket with his cap in both hands, while Gwen cried behind her glasses and pretended she had allergies. Adrian wore no tuxedo this time, just rolled sleeves and a face gone soft when Micah stepped toward him. No council dais. No pearls. No kitchen entrance. Micah touched the place beneath Adrian's collar where the unfinished mark had burned for 7 Octobers, and Adrian whispered, "I never stopped choosing you." Micah answered, "I know." Because now he did. Rain began to fall, fine and cold, tapping the awning like the night everything broke. But this time, when a door clicked shut behind them, it was only Mrs. Kim keeping the warmth in, and Adrian was already there, holding the umbrella over Micah, over Jonah,